Very nice being here. I hope you have a great conference. I don't know if some of you were at a side event yesterday, but that was really cool. So, et voilà. Okay, great. My name is Gaspard Peduzzi. I'm a co-founder of APWine, leading on the protocol and smart contract development. I'm a computer science student at EPFL. I was. And yeah, I'm an Ethereum enthusiast for many years now. Very excited to talk about APWine. And basically, without waiting more, in the current DeFi ecosystem that we had the last years, saw a lot of evolution. We all saw that a lot. I don't know what was the TVL at the last ECC, but like the DeFi space was not really even existing yet. We still have today's crazy APIs, a lot of protocol launching every day. But as it becomes more mature, we have new types of protocol, new types of waves of trends. And what I wanted to talk about with APWine at the beginning is the importance of derivative in the financial traditional world. And yeah, basically, it's 50 billion is already quite important for the space, but very small yet. But in the traditional financial world, the derivatives are like most of the volume, and just the most used instruments in the traditional financial world. And so what I want to talk about is the future interest rate. Basically, in August of last year, in a student room with some friends next to EPFL, we were discussing about what's the current state of the ecosystem. We had this crazy summer, and with the very simple rational thinking, we were discussing about the fact that 30,000 interest on pools, it's something maybe not sustainable. And we were seeing a lot of people talking on Twitter on how should we short APYs. Like a lot of information were disclosed, but there were no way of pricing that in the market in any way. Basically, as a farmer, you would just move your funds from one platform to another, and I guess the choice were mostly about security and then crazy API, and you need to be just fast. But they were missing a whole level, a whole stage of the market where you actually need to be able to speculate on what are the interest rates and for what it represents in terms of liquidity and all. So yeah, boring definition, but basically the traders needed to be able to do that, and without knowing the name at first, then that's what we launched, Future on Interest Rates on Ethereum. And as it represents something for the traders, and this is usually something that exists in the traditional financial world is being replicated on Ethereum in some ways. We still need to address the community, and what it means also for liquidity provider is basically getting your paycheck in advance as well. We needed to find a way to connect the liquidity providers, the farmer, to the traders so that both can play around those interest rates. And what it means is that we needed to find a way for someone to be able to sell its like monthly yield on a deposit, or just the interest of a Uniswap pool, and so on and so forth. And so I came up with the idea of creating this derivative, and to connect the trader to the liquidity provider, the idea was splitting it using two types of token. One being the principal, representing the deposit, and one representing the future yield. So future being a contract with a fixed date of expiration, a fixed duration. And so, yeah, we started from here. And so basically, to take a simple example, that would mean that making a deposit of 100 DAI on Aave, you would get 100 DAI, and then depositing those interest-bearing token on APWine, they would be split in two. You would have the principal token, which would represent the principal that would be unlocked, so 100 DAI at the expiration of the future, and the future yield token that would be able to redeem the yield that was generated by those 100 DAI during that duration. We started on a ERC20, very fungible, because for needs. Yeah, so we started like that. We launched like a first alpha version. We were playing around with the testnet and like the derivative ran that used and still today on Ethereum. And like the second challenge was actually not the protocol itself, but how do we create a market for that? We should use ERC20, but now we need to trade them, and we need to find a way to make that easy. And so when we launched very quickly a beta and testnet, we used like 0x exchange, but that was really painful because of several challenges that I'm going to describe just after that. But eventually, as we continued to develop the interaction flow, the protocol, and the market itself in the project, and we grew the team, we were working on AMM that is like a 3-asset balancer-based AMM. So we started from the balancer implementation, and we wanted to create the market for those 3 assets. I mean, the principal token and the future yield token against the underlying, because it made sense to be able to trade all those assets. And in some similar project that we've seen recently, sometimes in a very interesting manner, they focus on one or the other, and there the goal would be just to have a market for everything. And so we came with different challenges, because now we have tokens, you can easily trade them, the interaction flow is simple, you can redeem the yield with the future yield token, and so on. But then there are still different things that you need to take into account to have an efficient market that has a proper characteristic due to the nature of the token. Which are mainly those 2 points. Like you would have yield-bearing assets in the AMM, so eventually that could result in some impermanent loss if you just take a regular AMM. The liquidity issue, as I said, we started with just an order book. But then eventually, trading yield is already a smaller volume in terms of dollar than the principal itself, of course. And then especially, I don't know, on a pool with like just, I don't know, stable pool with low APYs, that kind of thing. I mean, we were starting that on testnet at first, and then we did a bit on mainnet, but rapidly you have different issues like due to gas cost and just the cost of interaction flow, and especially with the period rollout, because at each expiration you would have a new token, so that would be a mess just to update everything. And so we took different approach for that. So for the rollout, the idea was that once we choose to go on an AMM approach, we needed to have the regular interaction flow of any liquidity provider in pools. Like you just deposit and you wait and you earn interest and you're happy with that and you're incentivized to do that. But that eventually, if you have to recreate a pool at each new period, that was like not very efficient and would result in some useless loss. So what we did and are still building on some part is a mechanism that would recreate automatically. So basically at the expiration of the future yield token, they would be burned, reinvested, then the weights of the AMM would be changed to reflect the price that would be set through different parameters. So we started an approach where it is set with just the actual yield generated through the last period, but that of course is like just a basis and would result in like important impermanent loss for some liquidity providers. So we needed a way for the liquidity providers to be able to have fair and efficient market making without too much action or something that would not be manipulable in a way. So for that, we have 2 options. So at first, it's a mechanism that you can opt out, and we go 2 directions. One, they will have customization options like you would have with UNICEF v3, where you can choose parameters that fits your best interest. And on the other side, we're working in some kind of 2-way auction mechanism that's for the pool token that need to be correctly weighted to avoid manipulation. So basically we have half of that at that point, and we need to work more on the second aspect before releasing that version, but that would be on a later stage. For the yield-bearing asset, we have an automatic weight shifting, basically, to be able to anticipate the progressive collection of yield on the asset on the pool. So basically, let's say that you sell, to make it simple, you provide liquidity on a pool, and the market price, I don't know, the API at 50%, and on DAI, for example, and then eventually people are selling principal token at 0.66 because they wouldn't anticipate that with that amount they would be able to earn 1 DAI at the expiration of the future for this principal. Then if no one makes any trade, or just if the market goes on, then the yield is actually being collected, and there is constant arbitrage that could be realized there, and that's actually extremely inefficient. So that's why you have a constant weight adjustment there. And then yeah, like the other thing was that an order book is actually quite relevant if you want to trade like future on interest rate, and that's something that we will keep in a later version. We're like probably working with some kind of relayer like 1inch and that kind of project. But the IMM in its current implementation really allows people to provide liquidity, earn fees like they would do on Uniswap, being exposed at the asset that they want. Yeah, and allow just constant liquidity. One issue that we had with the order book as well is the market making in general. Like the current user are not educated enough to be able to price it correctly, and it just fluctuates a lot. And the IMM is really efficient in that regard. But again, we do need that order book at the end to make it usable and yeah, the most efficient possible. Yeah, so then we iterated on different steps. We are very much finishing the audits internally as well for the core protocol and the IMM. And there are several directions that we want to take from here. One being tokenizing other types of assets. I talked about interest-bearing token, but we're very much aiming to tokenize everything that generates yield. So it could be like staking position, even though usually there is derivative for that, like with Lido, but also LP tokens for other types of position of liquidity providing, and with other types of liquidity provider, we have other types of yield as well. And one thing that we wanted to do since the beginning is being able not only to sell your future yield at a fixed date of period expiration, but also vested rewards like you would have on SushiSwap and that kind of thing. Like many protocols have generate a lot of yield, but it's vested for like months and even years. So that would be very useful for them. And then more in general, we focus the development on being as low level as possible because we want to bring that new primitive, and we think that's the correct way of building a protocol that will use as a protocol and that can be used in this legal kind of finance. And we are integrating a lot of pools as a protocol, and it's very easy, very modular. And actually, even though the governance will choose the asset for now, we want to lean toward a more permissionless integration. Like in Uniswap, anyone would be able to add pools for different assets with then a keeper mechanism for future rollout or different function call necessary. And then, yeah, then we started with futures because we didn't even knew that it was futures and interest rate. We just thought about connecting traders to liquidity providers. But then eventually, looking at the general finance kind of field, and even other protocols that are building new types of derivative on Ethereum, we want to do the same with futures, with options, just growing on a horizontal scale as well there. And yeah, so many things will be possible with tokenizing future, not only getting your paycheck in advance, but basically performing arbitrage between all those rates. And the idea would be that used as at a low level, product would be built on top. Like you would be able in like very simple interaction, just investing DAI in some pools, in some insured pools, and automatically getting your yield in advance, and then you know that you can unlock that at another day. So a very simple product that we want to be built on top of APWine, and at the same time, very low level to facilitate integration and general place in the ecosystem. Yeah. So it was short, but thank you very much. And if you have any question, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thanks for the talk. Have you thought about using roll-ups for the AMM, using an order book based?
Yeah, so I mean, when we launched the first alpha version, even Polygon and all was not that much developed, and eventually if you want to, like you talked about roll-up, I'm just mentioning sidechains because like that would be an option, like definitely for gas cost and that. We are definitely considering scaling solutions. But like the choice of the AMM was not only for gas cost, more in general, and that's more a layer that we want to build on top of the AMM. Like that would be the core market maker. We're definitely talking and considering different scaling solution, but for that we'll mostly follow what the ecosystem does as always.
You mentioned in the beginning that you wanted to short a APY. How would you do that with your protocol right now, or is that even possible?
So you would not be able to do that right now. But basically, if you want to short, I mean, it depends on in the way you want to do it. We'll probably integrate. I mean, we talk with different protocols that we're basically doing margin on different assets. At that point, it would not be safe or correctly implementable, but that's something that would be added on top of the basis of the exchange that we would have, even though you would be able to trade those tokens elsewhere, probably with oracles and liquidators there. But that's more a layer on top of the basis of the exchange that we're building.
So you would have a yield token in a lending market, so it's like recursive.
I mean, as we create this first derivative, and as always, in a very maybe perverse way, then we build more complicated things on top, and margin would be one. Now, eventually, indeed, with the current implementation, if you have DAI and you think 10% on that protocol is too much, the only thing that in the market still priced at 10%, then the only thing that you would be able to do is depositing your tokens and selling your yield at this market price because you think it will go down. Yeah, and yeah.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the speech. So I saw a lot of projects like doing double pools, separating the principals and the yield. And in that case, it's really easy to understand what will be the potential impermanent loss that I can get, for example, from the pool of principal, because if I like wait until the expiration, should not be any impermanent loss in that pool. So what is the impact here of the impermanent loss in a balancer pool with the 3 assets, and what kind of weights they have?
Yeah, so the way it works is there are like initial rates basically set that we set currently like just constant, and then eventually they can shift in mainly 2 ways. One being this mechanism of the weight adjustment for the yield. One other being there is a way of entering the pool with just one asset that is not like a swap in fake kind of thing that will update, and that's only mechanism to go in. We don't have the function to go out to update that way. So I would say, the impermanent loss would be the same as any balancer-based AMM with the weights that are currently set. But the goal of having those shifts is actually to avoid predictable impermanent loss. So I do agree, and actually the choice was not that easy between splitting those two tokens or even putting them together. But yeah, that's my answer. I agree, it's maybe a bit confused, but like, yeah, definitely we have the reuse balancer formula and the weight are shifted to avoid the impermanent loss due to the nature of the asset, but then you would have any kind of normal impermanent loss that you can have with an AMM pool.
Something I find very interesting is like DPI, which is an index of different of coins. So would there ever be like a potential later where users could sell like baskets of yield? So instead of buying like individual or even having to deposit on those protocols individually, whether it's Harvest or Wiren or whatever, to experience those yields, coming to APWine and kind of being like the global marketplace for yield, and say maybe instead of just buying like one future yield die from one place, could I buy like a basket of different dies from a different bunch of different locations, right? Kind of like an index.
Definitely, like at first, like I was saying, as we progress on the lower level as we can, it's separated pools for each asset. But then the same way you have a yearn that, or like those kind of protocol that basically optimize spot rates of yield, then you would be able to have the same with basket of future yield token, just bouncing from one to another. There are also other things that we'll probably do, like swaps on a later stage. But yeah, baskets of yield is definitely something that we would like to be implemented on top. And like I was saying, the goal would be able to just be exposed to one asset and eventually, I don't know, deposit it to insure a pool and just optimize the process. The goal is to make the liquidity provider able to create strategies with its yield. And so going through APWine, you would have a different experience than going to just spot rate of interest. Yeah. Thank you very much.